Kethra pressed his three-fingered hand against the cool metal surface of the observation deck. The massive ship called Silent Observer drifted quietly through space, invisible to the primitive beings living on the blue planet below. For 200 years, Kethra had watched different worlds for the Galactic Council. Most species disappointed him. They fought too much, destroyed their own homes, or never learned to think beyond their small lives. But this world was different. The beings called themselves humans, and they had surprised him many times already. The first surprise came 50 years ago when they split the atom. Most species took twice as long to figure that out. The second surprise happened when they reached their moon in less than 100 years after powered flight. Even the great Aldari took 300 years to do the same thing. Now, the humans had small colonies on 3 planets and were building ships that could travel between stars. Kethra filed his reports with growing excitement. These humans might actually be worth talking to someday. He watched their ships move cargo between their worlds. The designs were crude but clever. They used materials in ways that more advanced species never tried. A human ship looked like spare parts welded together, but somehow they worked better than they should. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human ship called U.E.'s Defiance. Kethra had been watching Morrison for 3 years now. The human was young for a ship commander, maybe 35 Earth years. He had dark hair and serious eyes that seemed to see everything around him. "Amy, what do our sensors show?" Morrison asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant Amy Brooks bent over her console. She was smaller than Morrison, with red hair tied back in a neat style. "All clear, Captain. The cargo ships should reach New Austin in 6 hours." Morrison nodded. "Good. Pete, how are the Marines?" Sergeant Pete Collins was a big man with thick arms and a deep voice. "Ready for anything, sir, though I hope we don't need to be." Kethra liked watching these humans work together. They trusted each other in ways that seemed almost telepathic. When Morrison gave an order, his crew responded without question. When Brooks spotted a problem, Morrison listened carefully. When Collins suggested a solution, they considered it seriously. The Velfani observer was writing notes about human cooperation when his instruments detected something that made his blood turn cold. Ships were approaching the human system. Big ships, military ships, ships that belonged to the Torgan Empire. Kethra had seen what the Torgans did to other worlds. They were tall, gray-skinned beings with 4 arms and no patience for weaker species. The Torgan Empire had conquered 47 different worlds in the last 1,000 years. They took whatever they wanted and killed or enslaved everyone else. The Torgan fleet consisted of 12 battleships, each one 3 times larger than anything the humans had built. Their weapons could crack a moon in half. Their shields could stop nuclear bombs. Their soldiers were trained from birth to kill without mercy. Kethra wanted to warn the humans, but Galactic Council law was clear. Advanced species could not interfere with primitive ones. He could only watch and record what happened next. Admiral Vorthka commanded the Torgan fleet from his flagship. The massive alien studied reports about the human colonies with satisfaction. Intelligence said the humans had maybe 50 small warships total. They used primitive weapons that fired metal bullets and simple energy beams. Their largest ship was barely the size of a Torgan patrol boat. "This will be easy," Vorthka told his staff. "We take their colonies, capture the useful ones for slaves, and kill the rest. The humans will surrender within days." The Torgan admiral had conquered 6 species before. He knew how these things worked. Primitive beings always fought hard for a few hours, then gave up when they realized how outmatched they were. Some tried to run away. Others begged for mercy. A few fought until the end, but the end always came quickly. Back on the U.E.'s Defiance, Lieutenant Brooks suddenly straightened up at her console. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple contacts at the edge of the system. Large signatures, unknown configuration." Morrison moved to her station. "How large?" "Much larger than anything we've built, sir. And there are 12 of them." The bridge fell. Silent. Everyone knew what this meant. Earth had been wondering if intelligent life existed somewhere else in the galaxy. Now they had their answer, and it didn't look friendly. "Send a message to Fleet Command," Morrison ordered. "Tell them we have visitors, and they don't look like they're here to trade." Amy's fingers flew over her controls. "Message sent, sir. Admiral Stone is ordering all ships to battle stations." Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they stayed at their posts and did their jobs. "Well, people, looks like we're about to find out what humans can do against alien technology. Amy, get me everything our sensors can tell us about those ships. Pete, prep the Marines for boarding action. If they want to take our ship, they'll have to fight for every room." Kethra watched the human preparations with growing sadness. He had seen this many times before. The primitive species always tried to fight. They always believed they could win somehow. They always died bravely and uselessly. The humans had 37 ships in the system. Most were cargo vessels with a few small guns bolted on. Their actual warships carried weapons that might scratch Torgan armor if they got lucky. The human fleet was spread across 3 planets. Unable to concentrate their forces before the attack began, it would be a massacre. Vorth Ka gave the order to attack. 12 Torgan battleships moved toward the human colonies like predators, approaching helpless prey. Their weapons charged up with deadly energy. Their troops prepared for ground assault. Their commanders expected to be heading home with new slaves within a week. But as Kethra would soon learn, the Torgans had made a serious mistake. They thought they understood humans based on other primitive species they had conquered. They expected fear, confusion, and quick surrender. They had never met a species that treated impossible odds as just another problem to solve. Morrison stood straight as the alien ships approached. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to fight beings from another world. They're bigger than us, stronger than us, and they have better weapons. But they made one mistake. They picked a fight with humans. And humans don't quit." Kethra activated his recording equipment. In a few hours, he would need to document the end of human civilization for the Galactic Council archives. He had done this sad duty many times before. He had no idea he was about to witness something that would change his understanding of war forever. The first Torgan attack came at dawn on New Austin Colony. Vorth Ka expected the humans to panic and run. Instead, something happened that made the alien admiral stare at his screens in confusion. The human cargo ships didn't flee. They turned around and charged straight at his battleships. "What are they doing?" Vorth Ka asked his weapons officer. "Those ships have no armor, no real weapons. They're committing suicide." But Kethra watched with growing amazement as the human plan became clear. The cargo ships weren't attacking the Torgan fleet. They were getting close enough to ram. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the human radio network. "This is Defiance Actual. All civilian vessels, execute Plan Crazy Horse. I repeat, execute Plan Crazy Horse." The Torgan weapons officer looked puzzled. "Admiral, they're not even trying to shoot at us. They're just flying straight at our ships." "Destroy them," Vorth Ka ordered. The Torgan battleships fired their massive energy cannons. Blue beams of death lanced out across space, hitting the charging human vessels. 3 cargo ships exploded immediately. 4 more lost power and drifted away, badly damaged. But 6 ships made it through. Engineer Lisa Parker commanded the cargo vessel Lucky Strike. She had worked in asteroid mining for 15 years before the aliens arrived. Her ship carried industrial drilling equipment designed to cut through solid rock. "Come on, baby," Lisa whispered to her ship as Torgan energy beams flashed around her. Just a little closer. The Lucky Strike slammed into the side of a Torgan battleship at full speed. The cargo ship exploded on impact, but not before Lisa activated her mining charges. The drilling explosives, designed to crack apart asteroids, punched a hole straight through the alien ship's hull. The Torgan battleship listed to one side, atmosphere streaming from the wound. It was still alive, but badly hurt. 5 more cargo ships followed Lisa's example. They rammed into Torgan vessels, like ancient warriors with spears, trading their lives for damage to ships 10 times their size. 2 Torgan battleships were disabled. A third lost most of its weapons. VO Arth-Ka couldn't believe what he was seeing. "They're using civilian ships as missiles. What kind of species does that?" The answer came from Communications Officer Ben Turner, aboard the UES Defiance. Ben had been a radio operator for 20 years. He knew every human ship in the system and every frequency they used. "All ships, this is Defiance Communications. Torgan shields are down on targets 2 and 7. Concentrate. Fire on their engine sections. Cargo haulers Delta 9 and Echo 3. You're our biggest remaining ships. Load up with every explosive we've got and ram targets 4 and 11. Kethra watched in shock as the humans turned their entire civilian fleet into weapons. Passenger. Ships evacuated their people to other vessels, then loaded their empty hulls with explosives. Mining ships used their rock-cutting lasers as improvised weapons. Even small pleasure craft carried bombs toward Torgan targets. The Torgans had never faced an enemy that turned everything into a weapon. Their battle computers couldn't calculate threats from ships that had no business being in combat. But the human military ships were doing something even more disturbing. They were learning. Lieutenant Amy Brooks studied the sensor readings from each attack. "Captain, look at this. When we hit their shields at this angle, the energy reflects back. But when cargo ship Lucky Strike hit them from below, it went right through." Morrison leaned over her shoulder. "Are you saying their shields have weak spots?" "Yes, sir. And I think I know how to exploit them." Amy had been the best student in her tactical school class. She understood geometry, physics, and probability better than most computers. Now she was using that knowledge to find ways to kill aliens with superior technology. "Ben, patch me through to all remaining ships," Morrison ordered. "I want every captain to hear this." Within minutes, the human fleet was attacking from directions the Torgans had never considered. Small human ships dove under the alien battleships, firing at shield generators that were never meant to be exposed. Other human vessels attacked from directly above, where Torgan designers had assumed no enemy could reach. Sergeant Pete Collins was preparing for a different kind of fight. His Marines were loading onto small shuttle craft, getting ready to board any Torgan ship they could reach. "Listen up, people," Pete told his troops. "These aliens are bigger than us, stronger than us, and they've been fighting wars since before. Earth had cities, but they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're willing to do to win." The Marines were scared. Pete could see it in their young faces. Most of them had never been in real combat before. But they were also angry. The aliens had come to their home system and started shooting without even trying to talk first. Doctor Helen Ward was working in a laboratory, 3 decks below the main bridge. She had been a biochemist before joining the military. Now she was studying samples of Torgan blood that intelligence had gathered from previous encounters. "Their blood chemistry is completely different from ours," Helen told her assistant. "But look at this protein structure. If we could modify our standard medical gas to target this specific enzyme." Helen was designing a weapon that would affect only Torgan biology. It was the kind of research that most civilized species considered forbidden. But Helen wasn't thinking about ethics. She was thinking about saving human lives. Meanwhile, the space battle was turning into something no Galactic Council species had ever seen. The humans were adapting their tactics faster than the Torgans could respond. Pilot Alex Martinez led a squadron of human fighters in an attack that defied everything Vorthka knew about space combat. Instead of trying to fight the Torgan ships directly, the human fighters targeted their sensor arrays and communication equipment. "We can't hurt their big ships," Alex told his squadron over the radio, "but we can make them blind and deaf. Hit their sensors first, then their radio dishes." The Torgan admiral found his fleet cut off from each other, unable to coordinate their attacks. Individual battleships were fighting alone against human swarms that struck from every direction at once. How are they doing this? Vorthka demanded. They're primitives. They should be running away or begging for mercy. But Kethra was beginning to understand something that the Torgan admiral missed. The humans weren't fighting like other species. They weren't trying to win battles the way civilized beings fought wars, but they were fighting like cornered animals with nothing left to lose. And cornered animals were the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. 3 weeks after the first attack, Kethra realized he had been wrong about everything. The humans were not losing. They were not even fighting a defensive war anymore. They were hunting. Admiral Rick Stone stood in the command center on Earth, looking at star maps that showed human ships scattered across 12 different systems. The old man had white hair and tired eyes, but his mind was sharp as a blade. He had been planning this moment for days. "Kate, what's the status on Operation Backyard?" Stone asked. Lieutenant Commander Kate Foster was the kind of person who could walk into an enemy base and walk out with their battle plans. She had been a spy before the war started. Now she was something much more dangerous. "Teams are in position on 7 Torgan supply worlds," Kate reported. "We've turned 3 of their slave species against them. The Zephyrians especially hate their masters. They're ready to sabotage every fuel depot and weapon factory they can reach." Stone nodded. "And the captured ships? We've reverse engineered their shield generators and improved them. Our new ships can take hits that would have destroyed the old fleet." Kethra watched in amazement as the humans did something no other species had ever managed. They were learning Torgan technology faster. Then the Torgans could develop new weapons. Human engineers like Emma Rogers were taking alien equipment apart and putting it back together in ways that worked better than the original designs. Emma had been a computer programmer before the war. Now she was cracking Torgan encryption codes. That had protected their communications for centuries. Her team had broken into enemy networks and was reading their messages in real time. "Admiral, we're intercepting Torgan fleet movements," Emma reported to Stone over the communication link. "They're sending reinforcements to the Kepler system. Looks like 50 more battleships." Stone smiled. "Perfect. Alex, are your boys ready?" Pilot Alex Martinez had survived the first battle and learned from it. His fighter squadron was no longer the desperate defenders who had attacked Torgan sensors. They were predators who knew exactly how to kill enemy ships. "We're ready, sir." New fighters, new weapons, and a very old human strategy. The strategy was simple. Let the enemy think they were winning, then hit them where they weren't expecting it. Admiral Vorthka was feeling confident again. His reinforcements had arrived, and he now commanded 62 battleships. The humans had maybe 20 vessels, left, scattered, and hiding in asteroid fields. This time he would crush them completely. "Begin the final assault," Vorthka ordered. "Target their remaining colonies. Show no mercy." But as the Torgan fleet moved toward New Austin Colony, they flew into a trap that had taken weeks to prepare. The asteroids around them weren't just rocks. They were human weapons. Engineer Lisa Parker's sacrifice had inspired hundreds of other humans. Mining crews had spent weeks hollowing out asteroids and filling them with explosives. When the Torgan fleet passed by, seemingly empty space erupted. With hidden bombs, 20 Torgan ships took damage before they realized what was happening. But that was just the beginning. Captain Morrison had survived the early battles by learning how aliens thought. Now he commanded a small fleet of captured and modified Torgan vessels. His ships looked exactly like enemy battleships on sensors. Fire! Morrison ordered. The fake Torgan ships opened fire on the real Torgan fleet from behind. Vorthka's forces found themselves attacked from inside their own formation by ships they couldn't tell apart from their own. Confusion spread through the alien fleet. Ship commanders didn't know which vessels were enemies and which were allies. Some Torgan ships started shooting at each other by mistake, but the most devastating attack came from Sergeant Pete Collins and his Marines. They had been hiding inside captured Torgan ships for 2 weeks, waiting for this moment. Pete's team had learned to fight in alien environments. They wore captured Torgan armor and carried modified alien weapons. When they struck, they hit command centers, engine rooms, and weapon systems with surgical precision. Remember, people, Pete told his Marines over their radios, we're not trying to capture these ships. We're trying to make them useless. Plant the charges and get out. The Marines moved through Torgan vessels like ghosts. They had studied alien ship designs and knew exactly where to hit for maximum damage. Within an hour, 15 enemy battleships were dead in space, their crews alive, but their weapons destroyed. Dr. Helen Ward's biological weapon was working perfectly. The modified gas affected only Torgan physiology, making them sick and confused without killing them. Alien crew members couldn't think clearly or coordinate their defenses. It's working exactly as designed, Helen reported to Admiral Stone. Their reaction time is down by 60%. They can barely operate their own equipment. But the humans weren't just winning battles. They were changing the entire nature of the war. Communications. Officer Ben Turner had been broadcasting human messages to Torgan slave species throughout the Empire. His words were simple but powerful. The humans are fighting for freedom, Ben's message said. We will free anyone who wants to be free. Fight your masters. We will help you. The response surprised everyone, including Kethra. Species that had been slaves for generations began rebelling against Torgan rule. Factory workers sabotaged weapon production. Ship crews mutinied against their officers. Entire planets declared independence. Vorthka found his empire falling apart behind him, while human forces destroyed his fleet in front of him. The admiral who had conquered 6 species was losing to primitive beings who refused to fight by civilized rules. How? Vorthka asked his staff. How are they doing this to us? But Kethra was beginning to understand. The humans weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting for ideas that other species had never considered. They believed that freedom was worth any sacrifice, that individuals mattered more than empires, and that even the weakest being deserved a chance to choose their own path. Ideas made them fight differently than any other species in the galaxy. Technical specialist Emma Rogers had finished her latest project. She had broken into the main Torgan military network and planted a virus that would cripple their communications across the entire empire. Admiral, we now have access to their complete battle plans, Emma reported. We know where every Torgan ship is located and where they're going next. Admiral Stone looked at the tactical display showing Torgan forces scattered across dozens of systems. Then it's time to end this war. All ships, prepare for Operation Homecoming. We're taking the fight to their home system. Kethra realized that in 3 weeks, the humans had gone from desperate defenders to galactic conquerors. But unlike every other species he had studied, They seemed to understand that winning the war was only half the battle. What they did with victory would determine what kind of beings they really were. The alien observer prepared to witness the final act of a conflict that had already changed his understanding of warfare forever. The Torgan home system had never been attacked in 1,000 years. When human ships appeared at the edge of their space, the aliens couldn't believe what they were seeing. Commander Steve Hughes led the human assault fleet from the bridge of a captured Torgan super battleship that his people had renamed Freedom's Price. The irony wasn't lost on him. The aliens' own weapons would destroy their empire. "All ships, this is Hughes," he announced over the communication network. "Remember, we're not here to conquer. We're here to liberate. Hit military targets only. Protect civilian populations. We're better than they are." Admiral Stone watched the battle from Earth, coordinating attacks across 15 different systems at the same time. The old admiral had learned something important about humans during this war. They fought best when they fought for something bigger than themselves. "Nancy, what's the status on ground operations?" Stone asked. General Nancy Bell commanded human forces that were landing on Torgan slave worlds throughout the Empire. Her troops weren't just soldiers anymore. They were liberators carrying medical supplies, food, and promises of freedom. "We've secured 12 planets so far," Nancy reported. "The locals are helping us. Most of them have been waiting centuries for a chance to fight back." Fleet Admiral Paul Grant was leading the space battle while Nancy handled ground operations. His ships used tactics that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Human crews operated captured alien vessels better, and their original owners. "Their main fleet is falling back to the homeworld," Paul reported. "But they're not retreating. They're preparing for a final stand." Kethra watched as the humans did something that defied all military logic. Instead of pressing their advantage, they slowed down and offered surrender terms to every enemy ship they encountered. Captain Morrison spoke directly to Torgan commanders over open communication channels. "This is Captain Morrison of the human fleet. We don't want to destroy you. Surrender now, and we guarantee fair treatment. Your crews will be allowed to return home. Your officers will face trial, but even war criminals deserve justice, not revenge." Most Torgan ships ignored the offer, but some didn't. For the first time in their military history, Torgan soldiers began surrendering to an enemy they couldn't defeat: intelligence. Director Carl Foster was coordinating psychological warfare that targeted Torgan morale rather than their ships. His people broadcast messages that told the truth about human intentions. "We know you've been told that humans are monsters," Carl's broadcast said. "We know you've been ordered to fight to the death. But look around you. Your empire is crumbling. Your slaves are free. Your leaders lied to you. You can choose a different path." The psychological campaign was working. Entire Torgan battle groups were laying down their weapons without firing a shot. Alien commanders, who had never questioned orders, were starting to think for themselves. But the final battle still had to be fought. Admiral Vorthka made his last stand in orbit around the Torgan homeworld. He commanded 200 ships and had sworn to die before surrendering to primitive beings. The alien admiral couldn't understand how his mighty empire had fallen to creatures who had barely learned to travel between stars. "All ships, fight to the death," Vorthka ordered. "Show these humans what Torgan honor means." The battle lasted 6 hours and changed galactic history forever. Human tactics had evolved far beyond what anyone thought possible. They fought with captured alien technology, liberated slave soldiers, and strategies that combined human creativity with galactic knowledge. Colonel Matt Turner led ground forces that landed on the Torgan homeworld itself. His mission wasn't to conquer the planet. It was to capture the government buildings and free political prisoners who had been held for decades. Remember, people, Matt told his troops, every civilian we protect today might help build a better galaxy tomorrow. Every enemy soldier we spare might become an ally. Administrator Julia Ross followed behind the military forces with humanitarian aid. She had been a social worker before the war. Now she was helping entire species rebuild their civilizations after centuries of oppression. Julia's teams brought medical supplies, education materials, and most importantly, hope. They showed alien populations that humans meant what they said about freedom and dignity for all thinking beings. The turning point came when Admiral Vorthka's own officers arrested him. "Sir, the war is over," his second-in-command told him. "The Empire is gone. Our people are starving while we fight for a cause that died weeks ago. I'm relieving you of command." The Torgan surrender was unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of demanding tribute or territory, the humans offered reconstruction aid. Instead of executing enemy leaders, they established courts that followed legal procedures. Instead of keeping captured territory, they helped former slave worlds establish their own governments. Keth-Ra watched in amazement as the humans did something no conquering species had ever done. They gave their victory away. Captain Morrison met with surrendering Torgan officers on neutral ground. The human captain looked tired but determined as he explained the terms. "You'll face trial for war crimes," Morrison told them. "But you'll have lawyers. Evidence will be presented fairly, and sentences will be proportional to actual crimes committed. We're not seeking revenge. We're seeking justice." Even more surprising to Keth-Ra was what happened to Torgan civilians. Human relief workers like Julia Ross treated former enemies with the same compassion they showed their own people. They rebuilt schools, hospitals, and infrastructure without asking for anything in return. General Nancy Bell oversaw the integration of former Torgan military personnel into peacekeeping forces. Many alien soldiers chose to join human-led organizations dedicated to preventing future wars. "You fought for an empire that enslaved others," Nancy told former Torgan officers. "Now you can fight for principles that free everyone. The choice is yours." Months after the final battle, Keth-Ra received a message that changed everything. Admiral Stone was requesting a meeting with the Galactic Council. The humans wanted to join galactic civilization as equals, not conquerors. "We've proven we can fight," Stone's message said. "Now we want to prove we can build. The galaxy is big enough for everyone to be free." Keth-Ra faced the most important decision of his long career. His report would determine how the galaxy treated humanity for generations to come. He had witnessed what humans did in war, but more importantly, he had seen what they did with victory. The alien observer began writing his final report. The humans were dangerous, he concluded, but not in the way the Council feared. They were dangerous to tyranny, oppression, and the idea that might made right. They were dangerous to anyone who believed that some species were born to rule others. They were exactly the kind of dangerous the galaxy needed. Keth-Ra submitted his recommendation that humanity be offered full membership in the Galactic Council. His report included a warning that other species needed to understand. Humans didn't just fight differently than other beings. They thought differently about what victory meant. The humans had won the war by refusing to become the monsters they fought against. That might be the most terrifying thing about them of all.